Alright, so we're going to continue where we left off last time. And what we were doing last time is just animating some very basic transitions. So I'm going to go to the composition, new composition. I'm just going to recreate what we did. So our width was 1920, our height was 1080, frame rate is 24, our duration, or sorry, not 24, 2997. And then our duration we just set to 2500 for 25 seconds. And we called this, I'm going to rename it, Page Transitions Playing. Okay, so once we had that composition, then we went to a new solid, picked a color, so green to start, and we just animated the scale of it. So I hit S to get the scale. I set a keyframe at the very beginning at 0. Click stopwatch. I went up 2 seconds. I set this to 100. And there we had our transition. Okay. Then what we were able to do is just duplicate this, scoot it over a little bit, and then go to our solid settings and change the color. Duplicate it again, scoot it over a little bit. Solid settings, change the color. Duplicate it again, scoot it over, solid settings, change the color. Duplicate it again. Usually 5 is like a good number to go with. You could do more, you could do a little bit less, maybe 4 or 3. But you gotta be very cautious, but you don't go too crazy with it. Alright, so now if we watch this, you can see how we have those transitions popping in. Okay. Now if I zoom in via this, and then I scoot that over because it's actually like too much distance between each one of these. There we go. All right. Now I can make that a little bit more refined by changing the colors on these, because I think like these other ones might be a little bit darker. There we go. And I can just use that hotkey Control-Shift-Y and knock that down. And I can even do like every other one, maybe it's a little bit darker. Lots of different ways we can play with the color in this, just to make it a little bit more visible. Okay, so that's what we did last time, and it's, you know, it's okay, but it's pretty boring. All right. So looking at the stuff that we've already looked at, the 12 principles of animation, we can jazz these things up a little bit. Okay, so I'm going to make a new composition, so I can go to create new composition here. So this is the page transitions together, so this one we can work on together. And for the duration, I really don't need these to be 25 seconds. I can just make it 5 seconds. There we go. So I'm going to make a new solid just like we've done before. And I'm going to start off with, that green works. It's an ugly green, but it's a green. And what I want to do is I want to change the way that it's scaling. So right now as I scale this, it's scaling from the center. What I want to do is I want to scale it from this left side, okay, and then pull it out. So if I uncheck, or not uncheck, if I go to my pan behind tool right here, this allows me to grab this manipulator and move this around. So this is where it's scaling to, okay, it's like centered on this. So if I move this all the way to this side, it'll scale to that. Now you have to be accurate with this, so I'm going to hold the control key, and you can see how it's snapping right along that edge. Okay, so once it's there, then I can scale, and you can see how it's scaling right to that spot. All right. Now I don't want it to scale in both directions. I only want it to scale in the width-wise, not the height. So if I uncheck this chain, then I grab this one, you can see how that's going to scale that way. All right. So there's two numbers here. The first one is going to always be X. Okay. X is your horizontal dimension. Y, which is this one, is your vertical dimension. All right, so if I want to scale it vertically, I can scale it vertically. All right, So now what I'm going to do is the same thing we did on the other one. I'm going to set my X to 0. Okay, the Y stays at 100, which is perfect. I'm going to set a keyframe at the beginning. I'm going to go up a couple seconds, like to 2, and I'll just set this to 100. So now if we rewind and play, there we go. Now it looks pretty much like we had before. I mean, this animation is pretty boring. It's just straight ahead, boom, there it is. What I want to do is I want to enhance this animation. I want to change the speed of it, because right now it's just a constant speed. There's no changes to it at all. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on the scale, and I'm going to go to the graph editor. Okay, I'm going to set this back to the default. And the graph editor shows the value. So it says your scale was at 0, your scale is at 100, and here's the transition from 0 to 100. That's how it gets from 0 to 100. So what I could do is I could click on this, and if I zoom in, I can hold the Alt key and I can actually pull handlebars out, and I can change how it gets there. So instead of it going straight, which is what it was doing, what this is going to do is it's going to go very quickly up to like 50 or 60, and then slowly it'll get to the rest of it. All right, so now if we were to watch that, you can see how we've changed the speed of that. Okay, I'm also going to cut my work area to about here, just so I'm not seeing all that extra stuff. So you can see there how quick it goes at the beginning and then how slow it goes at the end. Then I can switch it, so I'm going to go the other way. Okay, so this graph will now be this way. So it'll be very, very slow at the beginning, and then about halfway through it'll just shoot up. Boom. Okay, so there's lots of different ways we can control this animation without touching the actual keyframes themselves. We can just play with these handlebars to control that. All right, now this is the value graph, and in 3D they have value graphs, and I enjoy using value graphs because it's easy to play with for me, because I've used them for so long. But the default one that most people use in After Effects is a speed graph. So I'm just right-clicking down here and going to speed graph, and I'm going to reset this back to the default. So I'm going to switch my graph off. I'm going to grab both of these and Control click them. Okay, so this gets back to the diamond, back to the boring slide right across. So if I right-click on these, go to Keyframe Assistant, you'll see that there's different options that we could set here. So I'm going to go to Easy Ease, and you'll see that the keyframes change shape. Okay, this signifies that they are easy ease. And then I'm going to go back to the graph, and you'll see that this is now the speed graph. Okay, so what I want to do is I'm going to click on the handlebar here, and I'm going to drag this over. Okay, so all we need to do is look at this and say, what is the speed? We're not working about value. The higher this is, the faster it's going. The lower it is, the slower it's going. So I grab these handlebars and pull them over, and you can see this should go pretty slow and then fast right at the end. There we go. Okay, so that did exactly what the other one did I just showed. Now I can grab the handlebars and pull them the other way. And now it goes fast at the beginning and then slow at the end. All right, so there's different ways we can transition these pieces, and each way is going to kind of give us a different little story about it. So in this case, it's going fast and then slow. The other case, it went slow and then fast. Okay, so what I can do is after I have that, turn this graph off, I can duplicate it, offset it, and do the same stuff that we've done before. Now one thing I need to do is, if you see what I'm doing here, I'm dragging, but I'm getting this like slash line. It's hard to see, but there's a slash line there. And my icon is actually different than it was before. This is not the moving layers tool. Right now I'm still in the pan behind tool, causing this. So I'm going to hit undo. I'm going to hit V to get back to that move tool. And then I'm just going to scoot this over a couple frames. Then I'm going to change the color. I'm going to duplicate it again, Control D, scoot it over, Control Shift Y, change the color, duplicate it again, Control Shift Y, change the color, scoot it over. Control D, Control Shift Y. Scoot it over. Okay, now we should be able to look at this and see a much more interesting transition than the one before. All right, so it definitely looks more interesting than what we had before, especially with just the timing of it. Okay, now if I don't like how fast that's going or how slow it's going, I can grab all of these layers, hit S because that's where my keyframes are, and I can just grab these and scoot them over this way. So now instead of it taking 2 seconds, it should go a bit quicker in how it gets to the end. All right. So it looks like it's going slow. In a second, it'll play it in real time. There we go. Okay, and maybe even a little bit quicker still. There we go. So you can see how we can play with these transitions and really affect how all of this is happening. I could also go through, and if I don't like how big these gaps are here, and click off my keyframes, I can just scoot these a little bit closer to each other. And the closer these are, the less of that spacing you'll see. Okay, because it's just going to control how stacked these are together. And sometimes I'll do maybe like a bigger space, and then a littler space, and then a littler space, and then a very tiny space. And that will, again, manipulate how we're viewing this. So there's lots of different ways that we can play with the looks of these things, and it literally is just kind of like testing things out. It's just grabbing some stuff, setting some keyframes, and then playing with the position of the layers in relationship to each other, and then playing with these keyframes as they go too. Okay. Awesome. So let's see what else we can do with this. So let's say I created another new comp, page transitions center scale. I'm going to make another new solid. I'm going to pick a color. There we go. And I'm going to go to scaling, and this time I'm going to scale it right from the center. Okay, so I'm going to go turn the lock off because I just want to scale it, not like that. I want to scale it like this. I'm going to go. Okay, so we start off at 0. We hit the scale button. We scoot up a couple seconds. Set this to 100. And there we go. Now let's say I don't want to go all the way to 100. There's other transitions that we could play with also. So let me set this to maybe 22%. Okay. So I just scaled that to 22%. I'm going to still grab these keyframes. And if I go to the graph editor, you can see the graph just goes straight across, meaning it's one constant speed. So I need to grab these, right click, and go to Easy Ease. And then go back to that, and then we'll get the little bumpy thing. And then I'm going to just change the speed of this. Now, a couple things about the graph editor here, let me just make this bigger so we can see it, is there's 2 values here that we set keyframes on. So there's actually 2 curves. There's this red one, which is the X in this case, and then there's the green one, which is this one that we animated, the Y. And if I click on this, I'm getting both handlebars. So there's a handlebar here, it's a little dot, and there's a little dot right there. And on this side there's 2 dots, but they're stacked on top of each other because I haven't moved them. But if I click and drag, you can see that it definitely did move that one off of it, and we have this other one. So now I can go ahead and tweak this. So I think what I want to do is maybe go fast, like that, and then slow down. There we go. So we'll turn that off. We'll pull this down. And now if we rewind and hit play. Okay, let me zoom back out again. Let me set my work area to about here. I'm just using the N key. And there it is. Now that's going too slow. That's like way too slow. So I'm just going to pull this back to before 1. There we go. So you can see there's definitely like a speed where it's like that. Lower this work area a bit more. Okay. So now I'm going to duplicate this. And I'm going to go to my solid settings. I'm going to change my color. Actually, let me hit cancel there. I'm going to change my color to, let's see, this is 214, so I'm going to just subtract 180, and that gives me 34. I think that's right. All right, now instead of offsetting these, which obviously would work, I get this, and then I get that. What I can do is I can just scoot this one up above it, so it's resting on top of it. So now, see how they just like pop in together? And then I'm going to duplicate this again. I'm going to, let me make it bigger so I can see it. Go to my solid settings. I'm going to leave it that same color. Okay, and this one I'm just going to scoot below that one. Now I am holding shift so that it constrains it up and down. So if I don't hold shift, you can see I can move it anywhere, but if I hold shift, it locks it to vertically. Alright, so there we go. Alright, cool. And then what I'm going to do is duplicate that again. Go to my solid settings. And I'm going to pick, set this back to 214. I'm going to set this darkness down more. So I'm going to go to maybe 44. Alright, so if we pull this out, you'll see that we have this darker blue. And this darker blue one is going to go on the very bottom. Okay. Not really liking the distance there. Let me scoot it down a bit. It's too far. And you can use the arrow keys too. So if I zoom in, you can see there's a tiny hair. I can just use the up arrow keys to line that up better. There we go. Alright, so I'm going to duplicate that one. And I'm just going to scoot this one way up top. I'll zoom in just so I can make sure that it is definitely touching. There we go. Right. So now I've just created my page transition like this. And I could change how these things come on too. So I could say the first one that I want to come on is this right there. And then these two would be offset a little bit. And then these two would be offset a little bit more. So now if we watch that, you see how we can play with how this transition happens. Okay, so all we've done is just added some keyframes, adjusted how fast they're going from one to the next, and then we've tweaked the positioning and the rotation and all that stuff. Okay, now I'm using scale in all of these, and then in this one I just moved the position, but I could actually go to another one. Crazy. I'm calling this one crazy because it probably is crazy. I'm going to make a new solid. I'm going to put the pivot down here, or down here, up here. So I'm going to go to the Y key, move the pivot up here, hold Control to snap it. There we go. And what I want to do is I'm going to scale it vertically, like that. Okay, so I'm going to keep this maybe about 20% there. And I'm going to animate this one. So I want to animate this maybe coming out like that. And then I can animate it dropping down like this. Alright, so what I'm going to try to do here is I'm going to try to have this slide across the screen like this. Okay, and before it gets there, I'm going to have it rotate like that, and then scale up. Okay, so I'm going to start it off screen. I think I want the pivot maybe down here. I think. Okay, down there. I'm just sizing this up, trying to get it lined up as best as I can. Right there. Okay, now I can slide it off screen. Alright, so I'm going to set position first. So I hit P. This is my start point. I'm going to go up to about here, hold shift, slide it into frame. Okay, so we're going to go all the way to the end. Alright, so now this just goes straight across. Okay, now I need to rotate it. Okay, but I don't want to start the rotation all the way at the beginning. If I click on rotate here, I go up a bit, and then I rotate it negative 90 degrees. This is essentially what I want, but I don't want it to be going like that. I think that's kind of like a weird transition. What I want to do is, let me just scoot these down. I want this to come across like this, and then right when it's about here, that's when it's going to transition. So my first keyframe will be right there-ish, okay? And then, as it comes up, you can see it's happening there. Now what I'd like to do is time these so that both of these happen at the same time interval. So if I hit U, you can see where the keyframes are actually at. Let me zoom in so we can see it. So this is showing this keyframe coming across like this, and then it shows the rotation one starting here and then popping in. Okay, so what I'm going to do is I'm going to adjust my position first. So I'm just going to right click, go highlight my keyframes, right click, easy ease, go to my graph, and then just pull that. So I think I want it to go fast first and then slow. Okay, so I just moved these keyframes over, so I'm going to get the fast and then slow. Back to the graph editor off. Okay, so you can see how fast it's going. So then right about here is actually where I want this first keyframe, because I moved my graph, so now that's going to update that. And then this keyframe should be about here at the end, so that they all both fall in sync at the same time. Okay, so now I can click on these two, go to my easy ease, go to the graph editor, and right now I'm seeing both. I'm seeing position and I'm seeing rotation. If I come down here to view, I can say don't show animated properties, just show the selected, and that's the selected one right here. So then I can control this and say, okay, I want this to go fast at the beginning and then slow at the end. So I turn the graph off, come back. Oops. I set my work area so we don't see all that. There we go. Alright, so there's this thing sliding in and then popping up. Alright, I think maybe I'll take this rotation and just scoot it back a bit and just see what that does. Maybe a little bit more. Nope, I don't like that. I like how it slides and then closes that gap. Okay, so let's say we're going to go with that. All right. So now we've positioned it, we've rotated it, and now I'm going to scale it. So I want to keep these up, but I want to add scale into the mix. So I hold on Shift and add S. And now I can see the scale right here. So after these have completed their movement, I'm going to hit the scale button. I'm going to go up a bit, and I'm going to take this scale up to 100. Or 186, whatever it takes to get it over there. Okay, so I'll take these 2 points. I'll right click and go to Easy Ease. I'll go to my graph editor, and I'm going to frame it so I can see it, and then pull these over. So I'm going to go slow fast first and just see what happens. There we go. I like how that transition happens because it seems to be a little bit different than the other two. The other two go fast then slow, and then this goes slow then fast. So it kind of breaks up that movement. All right, so I'm going to turn the graph off, and then I'm going to just hit U to hide all these things, and then I can duplicate this, change my coloring, duplicate it again, change my coloring again, duplicate it again, change my coloring again, duplicate it again, change my coloring again. Okay, and then just offset them. So that one will go over a couple frames, these will go over a couple frames. I'm just shift clicking all of these. A different way to do it than the way I did before, but it still works. All right, and so my work area is a little bit too short, so I'm just going to make this a little bigger. All right, so you can see how you can create some very interesting shapes and transitions with what we're doing here. And it may be going a bit fast, so maybe I'll hit U on here. I want to hit you on here. And I could grab some of these keyframes. So at first, let me go to position, and maybe I'll just take these position ones and just scoot these over a little bit. Then I'll hit rotation, grab the rotation keyframes, maybe scoot those over a little bit, and then go to scale and scoot these over. I have to grab both scales because both scales are kind of affecting, they happen at a certain time. So what I can't have happen is they start scaling before they're done rotating. Okay, so it's done rotating about here, and then they start scaling out. Okay, so that should be a little bit slower. And again, my work area needs to be a tad bit bigger. So you'll see that this transition is basically locked to about 2 seconds. 2 seconds is a good time for a transition to happen, because what we aren't doing is we are not making this thing take forever. It's supposed to be a transition. It's supposed to be just something that happens quick to get us from one thing to the other. So as we're showing one thing here, then we can transition our video to something else. Okay, so it's kind of like clearing the paper, so we can add a different animation in there. And in this case, we're seeing just flat colors, but eventually we could add other stuff into the mix. Okay, so for the assignment part of this, you're going to be taking this first one that we did together, okay, the page transitions together, which was just this kind of wipe across, and you're going to do that one on your own. Okay, you can watch the video, but just do it on your own. Make sure you understand all the concepts of it. Then you're going to create 4 other ones. Okay, so these are just examples of different ones that you could create doing these same kind of transition things. Okay, the last one should probably be as complicated as this is, where you're animating now multiple properties, not just rotate or scale or whatever, but you're animating 2 or 3 different properties at the same time to get these to kind of sink in. So maybe it's even just position and scale as opposed to position, rotate, and scale. Okay, but I want to see every single keyframe that you have should have this slow in, slow out on each one of these. Okay, they should have that manipulation on there, not just clicking the easy ease, but actually going into the graph editor and tweaking what these graphs are looking like. Okay, if you don't, it's going to be apparent. Okay, and this assignment is, we're trying to show good animation, and that's how we show good animation, by adding these things in there. Okay, and keep them simple. This doesn't have to be a complex thing. It could be very, very simple as to what you're doing. All of these are just rectangles here. All of these are just rectangles here. See what you can do with the most stuff. It's not about creating a bunch of fancy things. It's not about a bunch of craziness happening. It's just something very simple to take us from one point to the next. That happened perfectly. Now, just a bonus part of this is that these things could be used in more than one spot. So right here, we have these colors, but let's say we didn't want these colors. Instead of going back and changing all the colors here, what I can do is go to Layer and add an adjustment layer to the top of this. And this adjustment layer is going to work very similar to Photoshop in that anything below this adjustment layer is affected by the adjustment layer. The better thing than Photoshop is that in here we can go to effects, and any of these effects that we add to it pretty much will affect all the ones below it. So if I go to color correction and I go to hue and saturation, it brings up my effects, and then I can slide my master hue, and you can see how I can take these from blue to now pink, or to red, or to yellow, or to green, and then eventually I'll get back to blue. Or I can play with their saturation, or I can play with their lightness. Okay, so it's not just about creating these things. Eventually you'll be creating these to be used in a multitude of ways. I mean, look how fancy that coloration looks. Okay, so eventually we'll get into doing more of these. You don't have to play with the adjustment layers, but I just wanted to show you them and introduce them now so that we can start to play with those in the future. There are also other ones like Colorama, there it is, which allows us to add colors. So if you look at this, these colors are completely different because what it's doing now is just changing the color based on intensity. But if I set it to blue, it would change the color based on blue. And it would change the color based on the lightness or based on the saturation value. Okay? And if I go down further, output cycle, here are the colors that it's based on. So here's the first one, and then the second one, and then the third one, all the way around. They have presets, so I can make this Caribbean, kind of neat. I can make it clay. I can make it copper. These are all just different, basically presets that allow us just to change our color scheme altogether. So if I needed something like this for a project, now I have this color scheme, which works out great. Okay. Now it's a little bit unintuitive in the fact that if I wanted to change the color of one of these, I'd have to go to this thing as opposed to just clicking here and saying I want this color, but it does have its purposes. Okay, so I'm just going to delete that. I want to show one more thing. I'm going to show it also does like blurs. Photoshop doesn't do blurs like this, but if I did like a Gaussian blur and I crank this up, you can see how it blurs all the layers below it. So now instead of just being those flat rectangles, we actually have some fuzziness happening. Let's really crank it up. And so this could actually be used as like an effect on top of a piece of video. Wouldn't necessarily have to be just a regular file. Okay, so very cool stuff, very cool stuff. I'm just going to save my work. And so you're going to turn in 5 of these, and each one of those should be in a different composition, not the same composition. I made a new composition for each one of these that I've created. Page transitions. And if I open up my example here, just see what I have inside the example. Oh, yep, that there. Oops, something fancier happening after that. There you go, page transitions. So you see the purpose of them, just to kind of take us from one spot to the next. There's page transitions, and then gone. Okay, very cool. All right, so have fun with it. Make sure you have your stuff set in separate compositions, and make sure that you have your keyframes animated correctly. You can see all my keyframes here have been manipulated via the graph editor.